What's up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of the Variety Views. I'm your host, the Variety Vendor, here to review Royal Rumble 1988, the first ever Royal Rumble show, not pay-per-view. It was actually a special event. I think it aired on NBC at the time, and this was the first one that they ever did on live TV. And I really wanted to review this with everything wrestling, but I just didn't know, because there were a lot of stuff going on like last week, and I wanted to review a lot of shit, and there was a lot of shit that I had to go through, and I didn't know if I could watch this in time, so I ended up just putting up everything wrestling without Royal Rumble, and just didn't want to go overboard, and but at the same time it was like, oh fuck, I'm so picky about these things because I wanted to do this on the actual date of the 30th anniversary, because it is indeed this month the 30th anniversary of the Royal Rumble 1988, the very first one. And let's just get into this. Commentators Vince McMahon and Jesse Ventura, who I always liked. I always liked Vince McMahon on commentary. Some people just don't like him because they think that, Vince McMahon doesn't know the moves and stuff like that. But I like Vince McMahon because he brings in a lot of enthusiasm into the broadcast position. And I think that is what you need for a show, especially a big show like the Royal Rumble. Now, the show, the Royal Rumble concept itself, we all know, Pat Patterson came up with it. But it was almost it was almost completely scrapped because they were doing that, during the house show loops as a gimmick, and nobody cared. Everybody thought that it was way too convoluted, and it wasn't very, it wasn't well received. Now, the first show was in Toronto. I think it was Toronto. Was it in Toronto? Hold on. I'm going to check real quick. It was in Hamilton, Ontario. It was in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, in the Cops Coliseum, 18,000. And, a lot of people were really, really, really hyped up for this show. This was in January 24th, last week. And, everybody was really, really hyped for this show, and they were into this. So some of the matches in any other venue wouldn't have been that good. But the energy from the crowd, I feel like, made this show a very fun show. We start off the show with Ravishing Rick Rude versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and I'm like, holy shit. Right away with this match, this is kind of like a dream match for me because I never seen them face against each other. And they had a good match, I thought. A really good, match with good psychology. Dragon was working on Rude's arm, and Rude was working on Steamboat's back. So very technically sound match. However, the fans were really hot at the start of this match, but then it started to go really, really down, and they started working a more methodical pace. Now, I'm of the belief of you should work a steady flow, but when the fans get really, really hyped up, that's when you slow it down a bit, and then you bring it back up when they're down. But the problem was, once they got down, they never really recovered to the hot opening that the match had. Rude was working on his back, working on Steamboat's back, and then he applied the camel clutch. The ref, I think it was Earl, I'm not sure if it was Earl or Dave, one of the Hebners, checked on Steamboat's arm, went up and down, 1 count, up and down, 2 count, up and down, 3 count. So, by the rule book, Rude should have won via submission. But the ref was like, let me check his arm again. So, he checked his arm again, and Steamboat, when, he brought up his comeback. I think he was just overselling to the point of, him dozing off or spacing out. I don't know. But I just, it was one of those very botchy moments that really brought the match down a notch. And other than that is, especially looking at it through the 2018 eyes, where you see Ricky Steamboat trying to get the crowd going, but the way that he's trying to get them going is by tapping the mat. And of course, we know now that if you tap the mat, that means you submit. But like the way that he was doing it, it was like, he's tapping like as if, he wants the fans to start clapping and get riled up. So it's really weird watching it back. The match, like I said, it was good, technically sound. There was some stuff that I didn't like about it, but it was a solid opening. Ended via DQ. First, Steamboat went up top after his comeback. He wanted to do the crossbody. Everybody was getting on their feet, and Rude grabbed the ref and brought him right in front of him, and Rude and then Steamboat did the crossbody on the ref, taking him out, and then Rude capitalized and put Steamboat in the Canadian backbreaker, and the ref signaled for the bell, and Rude was celebrating the music. Rick Rude's music hit, and the fans are like booing and everything, and Vince McMahon went, I guess he thinks that he won, and I'm like, well, of course he does. There was the signaling of the bell. Steamboat was on his shoulders in a submission move. There's the music. Of course, Rude thinks he won. Like the evidence is all there, but Howard Finkel got on the mic. It wasn't Howard Finkel. It was one of the Canadian announcers actually at this time, and he got on the mic and then he said that Steamboat won via DQ because he didn't say any reason for that, but I guess the reason for that was that Rude grabbing the ref. Of course that signaled for DQ. I kind of liked the finish because it kind of it took the fans by surprise, and then when they heard and the winner via DQ, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, everybody went nuts. So for that, and the match itself was kind of okay. I give it 3 3.25 stars. I think 3.25 stars is very passable for that. After that, we got Dino Bravo, and it was like the unofficial record-breaking segment, of him powerlifting. The unofficial. They kept on saying unofficial. So something's fishy is going on. And so Dino Bravo and Frenchie Martin, great name, they got on the stage, and there was Jesse the Body Ventura there working as a spotter for Dino Bravo. So Dino Bravo started off, warming up with 505, I think, or 495, and then went up to 525, and then went up to 615, I think, and then 625, and then 675, and as the weights went up until 675, because apparently the record at that time was 700 plus, was like 709 or 710, something like that. So he was working up to that record, the record powerlifting thing. So he went, for the 695, and he barely got it up. And then when he got up to 715, he barely got it up, and then you can see Jesse helping him out. And, so they were like, he broke the record, and, this is the unofficial record-breaking powerlifting challenge, and Dino Bravo surpassed. And they kept on saying unofficial. And later on, and then after that, Vince McMahon was like, look at that. Jesse's helping him out. And, then once Jesse got on commentary, he's like, no, McMahon, he did it by himself. And Vince McMahon, no, by God, help him out. And, I do a horrible Vince McMahon impression. But anyways, so that happened. Then we have a 2 out of 3 falls match for the WWF Women's Tag Team titles. And I'm like, fuck. There was I completely forgot about the Women's Tag Team titles. And I was watching this match, and the fans were really, really into this. They were really into the Jumping Bomb Angels, and they were totally booing Glamour Girls. And I thought this was a really, really good match. This is the reason why I think women's wrestling is so underrated. I would love for WWE to bring in more female talent, like really good female talent, because you see it here. So many great stuff. I would say, like, as in a pure standpoint, this was match of the night as far as wrestling goes. Like, a regular match goes. This was a lot of fun. The first fall goes to Glamour Girls, and then the following falls go to the Jumping Bomb Angels, and they win the women's tag team titles. This was a really good match. The stuff that Jumping Bomb Angels did, them working on the legs and the double team moves and the stereo figure fours, all of that sort of stuff. Keeping your eye on the ball. While you're watching this match, it's so well done. It's such a great tag team match, and I give this match 3.5 stars. This was really good stuff. The only thing that I didn't like about it is the length. I wish this was longer. Because by the end I'm like, fuck, I wish there's more, because I do have faith in them in having a great match, and I think if you take away the 2 out of 3 falls gimmick, then I'd be like, yeah, sure, give this match 4 stars. But the fact that it's 2 out of 3 falls, expectation is a little bit higher. So 3.5 stars. Then we go to the first ever Royal Rumble match. Yes, it's not even the main event. It's in the middle of the show. And one thing, before I get to that, before that we had Hulk Hogan. It was Hulk Hogan. He was. I think he was getting. He was talking backstage about signing the contract with Andre the Giant and everything. And Andre the Giant was like, I'm. And Ted DiBiase was like, he's like, he bought the rights to Andre the Giant, and I'm like, okay. That's weird, but all right. And he's like, he's going to, and Andre the Giant's like, I'm going to hand over the championship to Ted DiBiase. And so later on tonight, there's going to be a contract signing. So that's one of the big moments of the show. So I'm like, okay, maybe that's the main event. Then we have the Royal Rumble match itself, and it was so much fun. Now remember, there were 2-minute intervals in between entrances. So... And not just that, but there were 20 men instead of 30 of the usual 30, just 20 men. And I thought it flowed really well. You had integrated storylines going on. You had Stan Houston with Dangerous Danny Davis. You had stuff between the Hart Foundation and Strikeforce. The Strikeforce were like the underdogs, and you had the Iron Man of the match was Bret Hart, and he spent, he was the first entrant, and he spent like 20 minutes in the match, and even Jesse was really hyping up Bret, so you kind of there are seeds planted as far as 1988 of Bret Hart one day being something really big, so I really like that. And of course, the ending of the match was Hacksaw Jim Duggan last eliminating the one-man gang. And I have no problem with this at all. Like, maybe, looking back, I'm like, hey, it should have been someone that we can look back upon as being like an absolute legend, a guy in the top of his field, like, an Ultimate Warrior who was on this match. Jim Duggan, he was the most over guy in the match. So... very well done. This was a time where creative really had their finger on the pulse. They knew who was over. So I really like the fact that they gave it to somebody that was, the fans really liked. And he never chanted USA, which is very smart, because sometimes they do that. They go to Japan and they're like, "Hey, chant USA." No, don't do that. So they're in Canada, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan kept on doing the thumbs up, trademark thumbs up, and started doing the ho, so all of that is fine, absolutely fine. And there was a moment in the match where I think it was him and it was Hercules Hernandez who was leaving the ring, and it was somebody, I can't remember who. And Jim Duggan, like when he was walking to the ring, they kind of crossed paths, and he just pushed them aside. Jim Duggan pushed that guy aside, and then that guy, he he reacted to that by pushing Jim Duggan back, and then he walked away, and then Jim Duggan's like, "Motherfucker, what? Who do you think you are?" and pushing me. So he went back at him, and then that guy was just so far gone, and then Jim Duggan looked back in the ring, and then he got back in, and he was like, "Oh, man, we're really into that." So I really like that. I really like that he was playing to the crowd, and this was a fun match. Like, it was like 30 minutes long. So there aren't really any boring moments, and it's a very, very easy watch. So I'll give this match 4 stars. And the fact that this was very successful, it is a very monumental match. It is a very important match in history, because if this didn't work, then I don't know what would happen, right now. Imagine like a WWE without the Royal Rumble. Wrestling without the Royal Rumble, because this match was used in other companies, like gauntlet matches in TNA, and gauntlet matches in WCW. We've seen that, the World War III gimmick, the Lucha Underground Aztec Warfare, the New Japan Rumble, all of that. It's just that's a very important gimmick that is that has become a staple since 1988, and which I consider being the successor of the Battle Royal, which is, I do think that the Royal Rumble is the greatest evolution of a concept I've ever seen. You might say Hell in a Cell from the cage match, or TLC from the ladder match. But to me, I do think that the Royal Rumble is the greatest successor to a match. And after this, we had the contract signing, of course, and there were really good back and forth, and they were really milking the crowd as much as they can. Like, even Andre took like 2 minutes before even going over the contract, and the fans were really into this, and finally, he signed, and then, Hogan signed, and, Ted DiBiase went like, okay, now, give him the final, the sign of approval now. And so Andre then grabbed Hogan's head and slammed it onto the table, the oak table, as Vince McMahon likes to call it. He kept on saying, like, the oak table. So he wants you to remember that table is really, really strong, really stiff. So he grabbed, Hogan's head and slammed it on across the table, and then he flipped the table over Hogan. So imagine that, imagine that being like a big thing, and then you look at it today, where it's like, it's meaningless. Nowadays, it's like you do a lot more crazy shit. You beat up the guy, and then you put him through that table. But back then, doing a very simple thing gets a big reaction. Especially with a foreign object. So, yeah, I thought this was a really good segment. Even Ted DiBiase like cackling in the background was just so awesome. And it really makes me wonder, like, why didn't Ted DiBiase continue being with Andre? Because I thought that they were a great duo. They were an awesome, awesome duo. I think him and Andre are very close to Heyman and Brock. Very, very close. You could say Heenan, but I feel like Heenan sometimes steals the thunder from Andre. But with Ted DiBiase, he's like, look at this man, and he's laughing maniacally. And then, he just... Ted DiBiase doesn't say much to put over Andre. But Heenan, he kind of takes the heat away. It just feels that way. So, yeah, there you go. And then finally, we have the 2 out of 3 falls match. The Islanders versus the Young Stallions. And I thought at first that one of them was Fatu, or Junior Fatu, or Rikishi. But it turned out it was the Tonga Kid. And I wasn't really familiar with the Tonga Kid. I've heard about him. I remember I may have seen him in a few matches, but never to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, that's the Tonga Kid. I could have easily mistaken him for any other Samoan, because there were a shitload of Samoans back then, way more so than today, and I thought this was a really good match, another good match. I would say that this was the same. It was on the same level as the opener. Another thing is that this kind of felt tiresome because this was a 2 out of 3 falls match as well. So I think this was the only show that has two 2 out of 3 falls matches, and I didn't like that idea. This should have been, a regular match, or you could have had, the women's tag match, a regular match, and this being a 2 out of 3 falls match, because it kind of played into the storyline where Paul Roma got his knee injured, so his partner kind of worked the rest of the match, by his lonesome for a little bit until the final moments, and Paul Roma, lost at first, via countout, and then because they were working on his leg, and then he fell awkwardly on the outside, and so they lost by countout. Then go to commercial, come back, and Andre the Giant, Teddy DiBiase are doing an interview, and Andre the Giant says he's going to destroy Hulk Hogan. This is Giantomania is going to run wild all over Hogan, basically, and then they go back to the match. And now the beginning of the second fall. And the second fall, the Young Stallions go over. And actually, no, they don't. I wanted to say that they did, but they don't. The Islanders go over in 2 straight falls. And I thought that I thought that this was a bold move for WWE to do if the Islanders were supposed to be big later on, but they didn't. They weren't doing much after that. And then, as I recall, Tama Tonga left the WWE, and then he went to WCW. I think a year later. So this was a strong match. This was a very, very good match. The working on the Paul Roman's leg, and Paul Roma really working from underneath, and the fans really got into him, and his partner, trying to get him to fight through this, and but at the same time, I really wasn't into the Young Stallions because they were so generic, but they worked for the 80s. If there was a tag team that I would equate them to, it would be the American Males from WCW. However, at least the American Males kind of had a gimmick. They were Calvin Klein models turned professional wrestlers. While the Young Stallions, they were okay. They were young. They were tough ass stallions. I guess they're Italian. So yeah, there's nothing much more to say about them. As for the Islanders, they had more to it. It felt like they were a legit tag team, and I liked Tama Tonga whenever he was hitting one of the Young Stallions, and he's like, stay down, sucker. It's it was so funny. It was Tama, the young Tonga Kid. I can't mix him up Tama Tonga Kid, and his real name is Tama. What the fuck, Tamaroa. And so I really liked the fact that he was a little bit gangsta, while Haku was more pissed off, angry Samoan. Whenever he gets hit on the head, he's trying so hard to sell, but God bless him, he just can't. He can't sell because the dude is a badass. I guarantee you, he's never felt pain in his life. So yeah, that was it. That was the show. And as far as ratings go, it's really hard to rating something that is so old. But I will say that this is a show that I would say buy it on Blu-ray. I think that this deserves to be bought on Blu-ray. This is really, really good. A really fun watch. It's less than 2 hours. So that right there, it trumps anything that you would watch in WWE today. So definitely check this out if you haven't. And with that being said, rate, comment, favorite, how, please subscribe, share with your friends, share with everybody. And check out my next video. We'll be talking about something else.